Today I'll be talking about a relatively unknown tornado that affected areas near the town of Cheyenne, Oklahoma in February 26, 2023. What you see here is one of the, well, in fact, the only picture of the tornado as far as I'm aware. This was taken by Falcon Storm Chasing, so if you want to check out more of their content, go check their Twitter handle. But anyway, you can see that this was, in fact, a fairly large wedge tornado. You can kind of make out the left edge there, and it's a little harder to tell where the right edge is, but I would estimate it to be somewhere around here. So we're dealing with a pretty large tornado, as you can see. And so in this video, I'm going to go over the forecasting and environment that this tornado formed in, and then I'm going to be going over the damage photos that various storm chasers and the NWS and news organizations took after the fact and try to analyze both the path and the intensity of the tornado. So if we go to the day one outlook, this was issued at 20Z, you can see that there is a moderate risk for central Oklahoma, and this is in fact wind-driven, not tornado-driven. As you can see, there's a 10% hatched risk for significant tornadoes. So what that means is there's a 10% chance that you will see at least at one strong tornado within 25 miles of any particular location in that 10% risk. And if we look at the wind probabilities, you can see that there's a widespread area of 45% significant wind risk. And this is much wider area spatially than the tornado risk. And like it was expected that the tornado threat would remain somewhat less than the wind threat, since it was expected that the storm mode would be mostly linear instead of supercellular. We'll see that wasn't entirely the case, but we'll look more into that later. So at 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, they issued a tornado watch for eastern Texas, western Oklahoma, and a small portion of southern Kansas. And you can see in the probabilities that there is some potential for like tornadoes. Like we have a 40% chance of seeing at least one EF2 or greater tornado. But they were more focused on the possibility of very significant severe winds. So the probability of one or more wind events greater than or equal to 65 knots, which is about 75 miles per hour, was 90%. So definitely expected to be more of a wind threat than a tornado threat. But as it turned out, there were in fact a couple of significant tornadoes that did occur, one being the Cheyenne tornado. And so here's satellite imagery taken the afternoon of the 26th. This is from the GOES 16 satellite. And what you can see here is you've got a fairly large extratropical cyclone. The low pressure area is probably somewhere around here. And then you have this large cold front that is extending approximately along the clouds. And what this is doing is it's drawing a lot of warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico because you definitely need some moisture since this is still late winter. This is only late February, and it's quite unusual to get an event of this magnitude this early in the year for Oklahoma. And so this is where the moisture is going to be coming from, mostly from the Gulf of Mexico. And over here is going to be in the area where there's no clouds. This is going to be very dry air. And we'll be able to see this once we go to some of the weather maps. So here we have a map of the 500 millibore winds. So you can see that there's this big trough that's kind of digging in down south. And so what this is doing is it's creating a large area of increased wind seal, very strong, mid-level winds on the southeastern corner of this trough. And that's what's going to produce the wind seal and helicity that's going to make this a favorable environment for tornadoes and other severe weather. And if we go over to this map, which is now plotting surface temperatures, surface dew points, and uh, the surface winds, we'll see that we have a lot of southeasterly winds, so winds blowing from the southeast. So this is what's bringing the moisture. And if you look here, you'll see that there's like 70-degree dew points near the Gulf of Mexico. So this is very moist, warm air that's coming in. And in western Oklahoma, we've got like 60, 58, so like high 50s to low 60 dew points. And you'll notice that on the other side of the dry line, which is the line on which the storms will initiate, you see that we have much drier air, so like a dew point of 47, 28. So we have this very strong collision between dry air and moist air, and that's kind of what's going to set the stage for this event. And so here's a sounding for Norman, Texas at 0Z. So Norman is a bit further east than the actual tornado that we'll be talking about today. So this isn't a perfect representation of the environment, but it's the best, it's the closest sounding both spatially and temporally that we have. So you'll notice that um, we don't have a very good thermodynamic environment. We have like a strong capping inversion here, and so what that's going to do is that's going to limit storm formation because ideally you want this like red line to be all the way behind the dashed line over here. And so that's going to mean that the storms have plenty of room to grow in the atmosphere. But what that like kind of like inversion over here does is that essentially puts a damper, it puts a cap on the storms, and so it is possible for storms to break through the cap, but it does like kind of hamper the upper limit of what could happen. And so you see that like we do have some moisture in the lower levels, although it is not what you would consider ideal for tornado potential. You got like 58-degree dew point and a 60-degree surface temperature. That's still like very cold. But this is being made up for with this incredible wind seal. So you see this like hodograph. So this is a map of the surface, well not the surface, but the wind speed and direction as you go up into atmosphere. So you notice at the surface we have like southeasterly winds, but as you go up into atmosphere, they're becoming much stronger and it's torn to be westerly winds. So we have extremely strong veering in the shape of the hodograph, and what you have is this kind of like sickle shape that is very favorable for tornadoes. And so you can see here in the helicity, like 400 storm relative helicity between the surface and 1 kilometer in the atmosphere. That's like extremely favorable for tornadoes. And so what's essentially happened is that the kinematic environment um, made up for the like temperature and dew point and moisture and still allowed for strong supercells to form. And so here's a map of the tornadoes that actually touched down. This is taken from the damage analysis toolkit that is managed by the SPC and the NWS. So you can see we have a few tornadoes here. Most notable is an EF2 tornado that went through southeastern Norman. This was a pretty well documented tornado since it went through a fairly populated area. And the other significant tornado that happened was this one over here, and this is the Cheyenne tornado. And this is a tornado we'll be talking about for the remainder of this video. And so here are some quick facts about this tornado. So it was on the ground between 7:13 and 7:18 p.m. So a very short tornado, only lasted for like 5 minutes. And the path length was 7 miles. So if you do the math, this averages out to a ground speed of 80 miles an hour or so. that's not the like speed of the winds in the tornado. That's just the speed at which the tornado was moving. So this was an incredibly fast-moving tornado. It would be like very dangerous to try and chase this since it's moving faster than highway speeds, and it was happening at night. The maximum width of it was estimated to be about 500 yards. And unfortunately, it did cause some injuries and a single death. This was thankfully the only tornadic death of this outbreak, which is a very good thing. And officially, this was rated as a 130 mile an hour EF2. But I'm going to be going into some evidence that suggests that this is a little bit low for this tornado. And I mean no disrespect to the NWS surveyors that surveyed this. There was like a lot of tornadoes that happened, especially that significant one near Norman that probably took most of their attention. And it's not like feasible that they go through every single tornado in full detail. So it's not surprising, but there are like a few issues I have with the official survey that I will point out. So here's the official track of the tornado. So you can see that it did most of its damage in the first half of its lifespan, and then kind of tracked over very unpopulated areas and just caused minor tree damage until it eventually dissipated west of Strong City. And so here's a radar loop to indicate this. So there was in fact 3 tornadic circulations, all of which produced tornadoes in this GIF. So you have the southernmost one, which did produce an EF1 tornado. So that's moved along here approximately. Then this warning also produced a conformed tornado. This was also an EF1. And then finally, we have the Cheyenne tornado up here, which did produce an EF2, at least officially an EF2. And so, unfortunately, the radar is very far away from Cheyenne, so we can't make out too many details in this, but you can see a bit of a supercell structure despite the low resolution, and you can also see a significant like rotational couplet if you look at the white flame, which is showing the velocities. And yeah, I'd like to analyze the radar data further, but unfortunately it is like pretty low quality, so we can't get too much information out of this. So let's move on to the damage. So this house is situated approximately where the tornado force touched down. So if we go to this map I've made, kind of tracking the tornado path, what you'll see is that that house was located down here. And so this is a double-wide mobile home, so not a particularly sturdy structure. And for some reason, in the official data survey, the NWS has it in this area. And I don't know why, because that seems to be in error, because I could not find any damage photos of any uh, buildings in this region, but this house was clearly like demolished by the tornado. And this this yellow pass coming out of the house, this is just showing where the debris was strewn. So if you go back to the picture, this is aerial footage from News 9. You can see that most of the debris has been like strewn to the north. And mobile homes are pretty weak, so it probably didn't take more than an EF2 tornado to cause this kind of damage. But with like the degree of damage to like trees and stuff, it's probably like near the like higher end of EF2 at this location. And you can see there used to be a garage in this region that was very weak and also got destroyed, and there's like a flip core. So like definitely significant damage, but nothing like crazy at this location. And here's another picture from opposite angle. You can see that like the concrete steps and stuff remained untouched, but the actual like mobile home got completely destroyed. And there's also a lot of debris that's been strewn about. I cannot say for sure like how much of this like exposed dirt is ground scouring and how much of it is just like places where there's no grass. So I am not going to talk too much about the ground scouring if there is any, just because it's hard to isolate. But anyway, moving on, uh, we'll notice a few things here. So we have a double wide mobile home that was also like completely obliterated. So that got wafted to the east. This is a north-south load. We have a single wide mobile home that also got completely obliterated. I honestly can barely see any traces of it. Um, and we also have like a large truck that got flipped over here and some assorted minor damage. And you can see that this building right here only had its roof flipped off and not really any other damage. So it's definitely a narrow tornado at this point in its life cycle. And like just see that this fence is like undisturbed, so the actual damage path of like the strongest winds was probably about that wide. So not super wide at this point. And so if we go back to oops, if we go back to the imagery here, we'll see that this was the mobile home that got um, destroyed and that was deposited east. And then that's the building that had part of its roof removed. Um, yeah, and so like the tornado was generally going like kind of northeast at this stage in its life cycle. And so here are a couple pictures of tree damage. So the white tree is actually it's actually this exact tree located right here. So it's like a little bit tough to say exactly what kind of winds it required to do this kind of damage because the tornado was moving so fast that the strongest winds probably only affected this tree for like a couple seconds. But you can see that basically every single like large branch has been removed, and you can even see like a bit of debarking on this branch. And this is a hardwood tree, not a softwood tree. Hardwood trees are a lot sturdier than softwood trees. So I would estimate this to be probably low end EF3 damage, so maybe like 145 miles an hour. And here's some more damage to trees in the vicinity on the left picture. Both of these pictures are from Tory Lane from Facebook. And again, like probably like high EF2, low end EF3 damage here. You can see a little bit of debarking in like some of the trees in the background. So definitely some more intense damage just to like vegetation here. Moving on, you'll see that there's some kind of metal building structure that has been obliterated, and like you can see that all the beams are bent and such. But there's a few other interesting things. So number one, it turns out that this building was in fact this like form outbuilding. So definitely not a strong structure, but it's impressive that it was wafted like 100 yards to the northwest, especially because this isn't the direction of the tornado motion. So, um, this most likely got picked up by like the outer circulation like before the tornado actually passed through. Because like if the tornado vortex is situated around here, the winds would have been in the correct direction to throw it that direction. And there's a few other interesting things to note. So it landed in the southeastern corner of a small graveyard, and you can see that no, number one, we have a lot of convergent damage. So the actual building got wafted this direction, but we also have trees that got felled in that direction. We have this bench, this concrete bench that surprisingly was moved from its original position here, and so that got moved west. And then we have like a few gravestones that fell that direction and one that fell the other direction. So definitely a lot of very small scale vortices going on in this area that produce so many different directions of damage, and it's like really impressive to see all of this coming together at once. Um, it's a good thing that this building was just like a form storage building, so there was no inhabitants. So anyway, moving on the damage track. Next, you'll see that this is a pretty well-built structure, two-story house, and part of the top floor and the roof got ripped off and deposited to over here. And so if we go back to our trusty map, that is this house right here. So this was approximately EF2 damage to this house, and the debris was deposited northeast. And you'll notice that neither of the two houses next to it, this one or this one, sustained significant damage. So what this indicates to me is that there was probably a small subvortex that happened to just pass straight through those two houses. And so only a single house got hit by the strongest winds. At least that's what makes the most sense to me. So that's very interesting to note because it shows that the damage path isn't continuous. Also, over here we have a metal or truss tower, presumably some kind of transmission, or not transmission, but like a microwave or a radio station, and that also got knocked over to the northeast, as indicated by the yellow arrow. So again, approximately EF2 damage. Often these kind of steel trusses are rated as EF3, but none of the damage to these weak buildings nearby is anywhere near strong enough to justify an EF3 rating. So EF2 it is. The next area of interest is these two outbuildings on the Black Kettle National Grassland. So let's go to the damage pictures again. So this is, again, more footage from News 9. Most of this stuff is from News 9. So you can see that this building had a small portion of its roof and the metal beams. A few of them got uplifted, but the second building, which used to exist about here, was completely destroyed. And you can in fact see a couple of damage marks on these two pickup trucks. You can see that the roofs of the trucks so dented in from debris hitting them. And from what I can tell based on the limited Google Street View of this area, it seems like this building was of similar construction to this building. And so complete destruction of a metal building system, the kind of standard rating for that on the EF scale is approximately 155 miles per hour, which is like a mid-range EF3. Um, and this seems appropriate to my admittedly untrained eyes because I mean we do have significant tree damage. If we hold on, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that this is a few more pictures from the NWS survey on site. We see that we have a pretty decently sized tree that not only got uprooted, but was wafted many feet from its original um, location, which is indicative of a pretty strong tornado. So I feel like going EF3 is justified in this location. If I had more knowledge of the construction of the building that got destroyed, I would be more confident, but I think in mid-range EF3 is good for this location, since it does appear to be built pretty similarly to this second building. And finally, this is possibly the most interesting damage of the entire tornado. So what we have here is a double-wide mobile home, and unfortunately there was a fatality at this location. This showcases how mobile homes are just not a safe shelter in the path of a tornado. And so you'll see that not only has the house been completely destroyed, but notably, um, we see that this concrete slab has been sifted from its original location, which was here. And so it's just looking at Street View, it seems like it was basically the same as this. So basically just like a little porch to get into the house. And this kind of movement of concrete slabs is very impressive in terms of tornado damage. So um, the one thing that makes me pause and not go crazy on the rating is that you'll notice that only this slab got broken and not the intact one. Sorry, not broken, but sifted. and the intact one behind it was unmoved. And it's quite possible that this was moved because the winds were blowing this way. And so that means the entire mobile home would have been pressing against this slab, and that would have provided a lot more surface area for the actual tornadic winds to kind of grab onto the slab and like move it. But if we go to the next picture, this is a wider shot. You can see how incredibly granulated the house is. So this entire like streak of like white stuff is debris from the house. So it's wafted like several hundred feet away from the house. And again, like this is basically unsurvivable if you're in a mobile home at that time. And so just based on that like concrete slab that got moved, as well as the extent to which the house got destroyed, I would probably weight this location as mid-range EF3, which is the upper bound for double-wide mobile homes. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that for some reason this house was surveyed as a single-wide mobile home, despite very clearly being a double-wide mobile home. I'm not sure why that's the case, but that's what it is. A few other things to note in this picture, there was like minor damage to a lot of the buildings on this like industrial area, nothing major, maybe EF0 to EF2. And you'll also notice that all of these trees have been knocked down in basically the same direction. So there was probably very powerful inflow winds feeding into the like main tornadic vortex, which is probably not super wide at this location, but the direction of the wind is probably basically feeding into it and providing an inflow jet for the main rotation around the vortex. And so, I mean, at least that's what I'm seeing from this damage. And if we go back to the um, Google Earth data, we'll see that um, here's the house that got impacted, and this orange line is basically an approximate path that the debris took, and like there is like minor damage to trees and roofs in the area. I suppose I should also mention that the wind field did clip the like northwestern portions of Cheyenne, but fortunately the intense core of the tornado did in fact miss the town, which is very fortunate. And after this, there's like pretty much no homes that got impacted. The very last damage marker that the NWS has for this tornado is some like minor is a snap power pole essentially at the end here. And I haven't really done much to analyze the second half of this track because there was basically no impact and there's also like no aerial footage of this area. But basically the stuff that I disagree with the official track is the initial starting point, which seems to be much further south than what they have. This kind of like southeastern bend just doesn't make much sense when you consider the speed of the speed of the tornado. Usually, if you have a tornado moving at like 80 miles an hour, you'd expect it to be a fairly straight moving system. And there's also like a few areas of EF3 damage that seem to exist, such as in that outbuilding and the mobile home. So, in summary, I would rate this tornado as being about a mid-range EF3 tornado, so with winds maybe between 150 and 155 miles an hour. Again, this is not intended to bash the NWS surveyors. This is just a amateur opinion. This is not official in any way. And it also appears that the initial track both sort of started a little bit further south, and it appeared just based on damage directions that the track around the middle of the pass here should have been nudged a little further to the northwest. So this is like the official markers for the survey, and there's the official. So this is the official like center of the tornado, and this is the like outer end outer extents of the wind field. And with a tornado moving this fast, you'd expect the side that's basically the front right corner, the front right side of the vortex to be a much more significant than the other side, because if we have a tornado that's like moving northeast, um, the winds are going to get added on this side, and they're going to get subtracted on the other side. So what you most likely have is very strong winds on the southeastern side and much weaker winds on the northwestern side. And that's kind of exhibited in this damage path because basically all of the like buildings and such that got impacted were um, moved to the like north or northeast, which is the direction of the strongest wind. Yeah. But these were just my thoughts on the tornado. Hopefully you found this video interesting and informative, and stay tuned for future weather-related videos. Thanks for watching.